Okay, and we are live. Hi everyone, and thank you very much for joining us today on the very first Boundless webinar series. My name is Carlota. I'm the marketing manager here at Boundless, and I'm happy to be here with Sydney Burks, our co-founder and CTO. So today it's a very exciting day for us since we are going to show you for the first time how easy it is to solve one of the biggest pain points in IT management with the help of Cisco Meraki APIs and Boundless Digital. Just one quick note before we start. After the session, we may dedicate 5 to 10 minutes to answer any questions you may have, depending on how good are we with time. If you do have any questions throughout the presentation, please feel free to ask them on the chat, which should be on the right side of the platform. We will be more than happy to answer any questions you will have. But again, if we do not have the time to go through it today during the presentation, we will answer every question that has been submitted through our LinkedIn page. So if you don't follow us yet on LinkedIn, please go ahead and do so. You may find here above a banner where you can click on it and it will redirect you to our LinkedIn page where you can start following us. Again, every question will be answered through our LinkedIn page, so don't hesitate to go and follow us now. So that's it for me. And without further ado, Sydney, the floor is to you.
Okay, hello. Welcome to everyone to the first episode of the Boundless Digital webinar series. We're hosting a series of speed sessions of 30-minute webinars so that we can help you understand how you can use the Cisco Meraki APIs to help speed up all of your tasks around network deployment and configuration management. Today, we'll walk you through how we've created, deployed, and configured thousands of Cisco Meraki networks in under 10 minutes, without error and without writing a single line of code. And we'll show you how you can do the same. If you're in a position where you find yourself often creating new networks, deploying equipment, or if you're looking for a way to automate the repetitive parts of your work so you can do so much more quickly, then you're in the right place. And we think that the next 30 minutes could save you hours or even days of effort. So let's go over today's program. First, we'll answer the question of what is network automation, and we'll discuss how you can use APIs to reduce much of your manual repetitive work, as well as eliminate human errors concerning network configuration. And in case you're not that familiar with APIs, we'll have a quick discussion to go over the basics. Then we'll look at the Cisco Meraki Dashboard API and show you how you can get started using it yourself right away. Finally, we'll do a hands-on walkthrough showing you how we've created, configured, and deployed networks using the Cisco Meraki APIs with the Boundless Digital platform. When you walk away today, you should have a clear idea of how you can get started right away using Cisco Meraki APIs with Boundless so that you can create, deploy, and configure your Meraki networks quickly and without error. If you would like to follow along, there is a file you can download in the file section, which has links to the Meraki dashboard and a page where you can sign up right away for a demo. So just to introduce myself, my name is Sydney, and I'm the founder and CTO of Boundless Digital. For 7 years now, we've worked with over 200 Cisco Meraki customers and partners, helping them to deploy tens of thousands of Wi-Fi hotspots and captive portals worldwide. We've helped them over 500,000 end users connect and authenticate to networks, and we've saved tons of hours for network administrators by helping them simplify their network management through APIs. What we've noticed over this time is that when it comes to managing a Meraki organization, although Meraki provides you with a simple graphical user interface through their dashboard, it's easy to configure a few networks. But once you need to start configuring hundreds or thousands of networks, then that can quickly become repetitive, slow, or error-prone, because you have to manually click through multiple screens over and over and over again. Now, if you've ever spent time on other vendor platforms, such as Cisco Traditional, you might be aware that there are command line interfaces that come with them. And the advantage to having a CLI or command line interface is that you can use your terminal to write scripts and configure your equipment instead of using a graphical user interface. The advantage to this approach is that you can easily save commonly used scripts to use over and over and over again. And all you need to do is copy and paste the code into your terminal so you can easily apply a configuration. You can also exchange these scripts with other members of your team, and that lets you easily share knowledge and processes. Finally, you can find scripts online that might give you an idea of best practices to use or give you new ideas about how to manage your infrastructure. Now, using a CLI can be extremely powerful if it's available, but there are a few drawbacks. For one, it requires a lot of specialized knowledge to implement and use correctly. In fact, each vendor CLI manual could take up to thousands of pages just listing out all the commands. Another drawback is that if you want to use it with a standard programming language, such as Python or PHP, it's not always obvious on how you can do that. And since much of the network and infrastructure is decentralized, that makes your job of scripting out management tasks for remote sites quite complicated. Now, unfortunately, Cisco Meraki doesn't come with a CLI. So up until now, that's been a non-starter. However, CLIs have given us an introduction into the benefits that we can have from automating our infrastructure. However, these ideas are not new. In fact, many of these best practices have existed for a long time in the world of DevOps. Over the last 15 years, we've seen the DevOps industry develop a paradigm of infrastructure as code. And this means that instead of manually going and running individual commands to set up your servers, devices, or other elements of your infrastructure, the components are configured by code written in a computer program. And once you have your infrastructure correctly configured with the computer program, that unlocks several major benefits. For example, infrastructure as code lets you store the code in version control systems such as Git. And that way, you can easily version your infrastructure just by versioning your code. For example, if you want to change your infrastructure, all you need to do is update the code and create a new version for it. The advantage here is that if you ever need to make a change which breaks your infrastructure or causes an error, you can always easily roll back to a version that worked before. And that flexibility makes you more empowered to take risk because the consequences are not as bad when you can easily roll back changes. Another benefit is the idea of repeatability. Once you use code to manage your infrastructure, you can easily do things such as duplicate configurations, and that lets you do something, for example, duplicate or clone your entire infrastructure so that you can have test environments and production environments. You can take configurations that work in one place and easily apply that to hundreds or thousands of other networks without spending any extra manual time on it. And that scalability lets you create large-scale deployments and manage large-scale configurations just as simply as you do with small-scale ones, because it's the computer that's responsible for making the changes and automating the process, not a human. Most importantly, since all of that code is fixed and written, once you verify that a configuration works in one place the way you want it, there's almost no chance that you introduce a random human error. And that means that your entire infrastructure is guaranteed to be consistent. Now, if we take these ideas from the DevOps community and apply those to network administration, we can see right away how this can change the game for managing large networks. To put it simply, once you automate the network management, you no longer need to spend time routinely running repetitive manual tasks that are often complex and require your full concentration. As a result, you can almost completely eliminate any accidental human error and accomplish 100 times more work with the same effort. The reduction of human errors means that you can expect much less unplanned outages, and you can have a higher uptime for your networks. You can expect a huge drop in the number of support tickets that you deal with because users won't have as many issues that come from mismanaged configurations. Finally, you can imagine going so far as to add artificial or some type of intelligence to your network automation. And that can do things such as proactively manage your compliance requirements or auditing for your network. And this can ensure that you always stay compliant with regards to security issues such as URL block lists or other general configurations that always must remain compliant. That means that you can prevent a large number of errors from ever even happening in the first place. And for the ones that do slip through and happen, you can resolve them much, much, much more quickly. That simply frees up your time as a network administrator, and that means that you can focus on more innovative tasks and be a lot more productive. So given all of these promises, how do we achieve this, given that Cisco Meraki does not have a CLI? And the answer is by using the Cisco Meraki Dashboard API. So what is an API? API stands for Application Programming Interface. That means that there's basically an interface or gateway that translates messages from one computer program to another. And specifically, in the Meraki case, it allows computer programs to communicate with your Meraki infrastructure. The advantage is, as we've mentioned, that once the computer program communicates with your infrastructure, it will always do exactly as you tell it for as long as necessary and never make mistakes. So APIs are now replacing the CLI as the preferred way to automate your network. So how can you use the Cisco Meraki APIs to automate your network? Well, you have two options. One way is by writing your own computer programs that interact with the Meraki APIs. Now that means taking the time to write the programs, making sure they work, maintaining them, applying for issues such as security, hosting, databases, which you can do. But there's also a second option that lets you use off-the-shelf solutions such as the Boundless Digital Platform. And that requires no programming at all. Let's just say, for example, just to dive in there, that you would like to get a taste for writing your own computer programs to interact with the API. If you've never done this before, then there are a few technical things, fundamentals that you need to know. We can consider these the ABCs of APIs. The Cisco Meraki API often talks about three terms that you should keep in mind because you'll see them over and over again. And you need to understand how those work. Those are called HTTP, REST, and JSON. The first thing to keep in mind is that the Cisco Meraki API is based on HTTP. And that means that the communication happens just like with web servers and your internet browser. This is a simple protocol that's used worldwide, and there are libraries built into every programming language that make it easy to use. HTTP gives us the concept of a method that we can use to perform actions. And there are four main methods that you'll see in programming. Those methods are get, post, put, and delete. The way they work is that if you want to receive data from an API, you use the get verb. If you want to store new data with the API, you use the post verb. If you want to change or update data that already exist, you use the put verb. And if you want to delete something, you use the delete verb. When you take a look at the Meraki API documentation, you'll see that they use these verbs all over the place. And you can see an example here when we look at the documents for creating a new network. Here you see that it uses a post method to create the network. The next thing that you will hear often about is the concept of a RESTful API. Now, this isn't something that you really need to know about in a lot of details, so we won't go too far into it. But the basic idea is that you can treat each element of your network infrastructure as a type of resource at a given URL. So a Meraki network is a type of resource, and you can interact with it by sending the HTTP commands to the network resource endpoint with the verbs that we just mentioned before. The final thing that you'll need to know is the format JSON, which stands for JavaScript Object Notation. If we think of a computer program and the Meraki infrastructure as two different people talking to each other, then the JSON would be the language and the words that they use to communicate. JSON is written as a text-based, human-readable format where you have attributes and values for those attributes. And this is how we encode all of the parameters that go into configuring our networks. And once we put that all together, the way that it works is quite simple. We have a client program which communicates to the API using HTTP methods, and it communicates by sending JSON. And those communication messages go back and forth so that the API can communicate with your program. Now let's dive into a demo. Before we can get started with the API, we need to generate an API key. So right now I'm taking a look at the Meraki dashboard for my organization. And we need to generate an API key for our organization and activate the API in order to make API requests. So to do so, we'll go into the organization settings, and we'll go down here to the part where it says Dashboard API Access. If this is not already enabled, you check the box Enable and you save the changes. And now any user of your organization who's an administrator or any other user, they have the right to make API requests to your infrastructure. Once you've activated the API for your organization, the next step is that you need to generate an API key so that you can authenticate to the infrastructure. You can do so by clicking the profile link here or going to your profile on the Meraki dashboard. Once you arrive at your profile, you scroll down to the part where you generate a new API key, and you see the box pop up here with your new API key, which you can copy and save to a safe place. Because once you close this window, you can't recover the API key. So I've already created a key. And once we create a key, the next question is how can we start interacting with the API itself? And we can do so by going to the Cisco Meraki API Documentation. The first program, the first API call that we can look at is like a hello world call. And that simply gives us a list of all the organizations that we have access to. So if I click on the link here for the organizations resource and scroll down to Get Organizations, I can see that it makes a GET request to the organization's resource. And the documentation gives us a bit of code which we can try in the browser. So I simply open the Configure button and enter my API key here, where it shows up. And now all I need to do is click Try It Out. The browser makes the API call to the Cisco infrastructure. And you see right away that we get a response telling me that this API, this user and this API key have access to the Boundless Digital Demo platform. So now if you followed along, you've just made your first API request. Wasn't too complicated. We can look at something even a bit more complex. Let's say we would like to create a network on our infrastructure. If I go to my Meraki dashboard, I can see that I currently have no networks in my infrastructure, and I would like to create one. So I'll open the Meraki documentation again, scroll down to the network's resources, and then click the option Create Organization Network. Here we can see that they give us an example code that we can use to create the network. Here is the API endpoint we have to call, along with the JSON parameters that we need to supply to parameterize how we want to configure our network. Now, since this is a slightly more complicated API call, what I'll do is do this directly in my terminal. You can see I've created my own JSON document with the organization My Network. This will be a combined network, and I'll apply these two tags, tag 1 and tag 2. And I've copied the example code so that I make a HTTP post request to the endpoint for the networks using the data in my example JSON file. Now that I have created my request, I'll simply run it here. And we can see that the Cisco Meraki API responds that it had successfully created my network for this organization. If we go back to the dashboard and reload the page, we can see that my network now is here as a combined network with the tags that I'd like to create. So there you go. You've made a basic hello world call and you've created a network with your API. Now that was fun. However, when you're doing this in real life in production environments, it's not as simple as just creating one network and going on about your day. There are often many complex scenarios and workflows that you might have in place when you want to create a network. For example, you might decide every time you create a network, you would like to apply a tag to it, or create an SSID, or bind it to a template and set a VLAN along with the VLAN IP. Or you might even want to import devices or bring devices from an existing network if you're doing a network migration. And there are many, many, many other steps that you might have in place in your particular workflow process. And if you try to implement these in code yourself, it becomes extremely complicated very, very quickly. We've heard a lot of requests from the partners and customers we've worked with. And what we've done is we've developed a workflow generator so that you can accomplish this very quickly without writing a single line of code. So let's take a look at that. What I'm showing you here is the Boundless Digital network creation workflow. And the way that it works is extremely simple. We first define a CSV file that has all of the parameters that we would like to use to configure our network. So this replaces the JSON that we looked at. We take the same parameters and just define them in our CSV file. And there's no fixed format, so you can use whatever column names work best for your networks and for your organization. We can enter all kinds of data that can be useful, such as the network name, the network type, the time zone, the address for the network. If we would like to use templates and assign the network to a template, we can enter the template name. We can enter one or more SSIDs to create, as well as one or more tags to apply to the network or the devices. We can configure VLAN names, subnets, and VLAN IP addresses, as well as VLAN IDs. And we can even go so far as to claim orders or claim devices or move devices from existing networks to the new network. And these are things that you can't normally do in the Meraki dashboard by itself. Now, once we've defined our test file as CSV, we simply go to the Boundless Digital platform and create a new workflow. To create the new workflow, all we have to do is upload the CSV file that we've just created. And here we can start defining the steps that go into our workflow. Now, I'm going to define a simpler workflow just to give you an idea of how it works. But basically, this whole process is customizable. So none of the steps are required, and you can make it customized exactly to how you need in your organization. For my workflow, as the first step, I'll create the network, and I would like to assign the network a name that I've defined in my CSV file. And the column that it uses is the network name column. I would also like to say that these networks will have the type that I've defined, and I will set the time zone using the time zone column. Now, as the second step of my workflow, I have several options. I can do things such as claim orders if I'm deploying to a new store or many new stores. I can configure SSIDs for my network. So I think I will configure an SSID to set up Wi-Fi, and I'll use the SSID name column. And I can even apply tags to my network. So I will use the network tags in my network tags column. If you want, you can even go so far as to do other things such as creating VLANs, as we said, binding to templates, or etc. If I decide to change my workflow around, I can even change the order. So instead of applying the network tags at the end, I could do that second. And there we go. Once I've defined my workflow, I click the execute button. And what we see is that the Boundless Digital Platform in real time starts communicating with the Meraki API in order to create the networks exactly according to the workflow that we've defined here. And we can see in real time the results of how far it's progressed as it progresses with the networks. Now, the advantage here is that once you've created this workflow, you don't need to create it again. So you can easily reuse it if you have more networks that you need to apply to. And the best benefit is that once you define these steps, they should never make a mistake. So if you have many networks that you need to deploy, they will always be consistent. Now you see we have a message here saying the workflow is successfully finished. So I can go back to my Meraki organization, refresh the page, and I can see that it's created all the networks that I've requested according to the configurations I've defined. I have my network names, along with the tags that I've assigned to the network, and they've taken the network type. Now, this has taken a few seconds to do this for 10 networks. If I have 1,000 or thousands of networks, it can take a few minutes. And I am 100% sure that everything is consistent in the way it should be. So there you go. You've seen the solution of how Boundless Digital can help you automate your network deployment by using the Cisco Meraki APIs, but without requiring you yourself to learn to program, learn API details, and maintain code. The next question you might have now is that once you've defined all of these networks, how can you manage those quite easily? Meraki gives you Meraki templates, which let you apply configurations on a massive scale. But sometimes if you need to make custom configuration changes to one or two networks, you might find that templates can be constraining. What we've imagined that we'll talk about in the next speed session are what we call the Boundless Flex templates. And the Flex templates give you a way to have the same benefits of Meraki templates, but since they use the API, you can have the flexibility to go afterwards and make customizations on your own. So there you have it. That wraps up the presentation for today. We've started by looking at the whole concept of network automation and analyzing how that can save you time, effort, and reduce your effort in fixing problems and prevent problems from happening in the first place. And it can make you more productive. We've seen how automation began with CLIs and how APIs are now the new preferred method to doing automation. And you've seen how you can start using APIs today with your Meraki infrastructure, either by learning to program yourself or by using an off-the-shelf platform such as Boundless Digital. That's it. Let's go to your questions now, if you have any for what you've seen so far.
Thank you very much, Sydney. That was great. And I really think that automating operations by using Meraki APIs can truly make a difference to many networks and to many IT teams. So yeah, let's move on to the questions. We do not have much time, so I'm just going to go through one of the ones that we received by email. Again, the other ones are going to be answered through the LinkedIn page. So don't hesitate to go and follow us on our LinkedIn page, please. So some of them were already answered during the presentation. I will move on to this one. Can we use this tool for existing networks or only for new ones?
Can we use the tool for existing networks or new ones? So today the tool is focused around generating and creating new networks. However, we're expanding the tools and the functionality on a daily basis. And that means that in a day or in a week or so, you'll be able to use the same workflow to generate changes on a massive scale for any existing networks. And that way, if you have networks that have varied configurations, but you would like to automate the configuration changes for those, you can build a workflow and apply it on a large scale. So that is something that we will show you in an upcoming speed session.
All right, cool. Great. We are already almost on 30 minutes. So you may see right above here a banner in order to go to a demo page where you can register and schedule a meeting with one of our experts. If you have any questions, you can ask them to them directly. And again, all the remaining questions that haven't been answered today will be answered during in a new post on our LinkedIn page. So in terms of next steps, you will receive in the next days an email with the replay of this webinar, if you want to see it again, and the program for the upcoming webinars. So you will have that in your inbox, and we really hope to see you on the upcoming events. So that will be it for me. Sydney, anything else that you want to add?
No, I think that's it. Thank you very much for showing up for our first Boundless web session. And again, if you would like to learn how you can use Flex templates to configure networks on a massive scale, tune in for the next episode and we will show you how we've done that. Thank you again.
Thank you, Sydney. And thank you, everyone. To see you soon. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.